When does a place or a building become masjid from the Shari'i technical point of view? There is a concept in Sharia where we are told that the sigha has to be recited. Sigha means the wordings. The wordings dedicating the place as a masjid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You can have places where people do namaz. Normally we call it musalla. But there is a difference between musalla and a masjid. You will see there are so many Islamic centers around in North America. Many Imambargas where they have namaz regularly. They might call it masjid, but technically it's not a masjid. It is a musalla, a place where they are doing the namaz in Jamaat form regularly. A place becomes masjid when the sigha is recited. When the wordings are recited to dedicate the place as a masjid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As soon as this dedication is done, what happens? Two important rules come in. Number one, that place becomes the property of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A masjid doesn't belong to anyone. It belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It comes out from the ownership of the donors or the founders who built it and comes into the ownership of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when that happens, of course those who built it, worked for it, donated for it, they can be, according to the waqf or the deed agreement, they can become the custodians to manage that place. But from the Sharia point of view, nobody is the owner of a masjid but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It comes out of the ownership of the donor. And therefore, you will see the masala very clear in this issue that a masjid can then never be inherited. A mu'min, builds a place, dedicates that as a masjid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. After 100 years, his children come and say, oh, my dad built this. We are the owner. You are not children of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is the owner now. And Allah doesn't die. You cannot inherit that anymore. It cannot be inherited. It cannot be leased. The masjid. Not the center ki baat nahi ho rahi hai, masjid ki baat ho rahi hai. It cannot be sold. It cannot be mortgaged. Because it is not our property. It is the property of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The reason why the Shias have been reluctant to build masajid immediately when they go to new places, because once you build a place as a masjid, not as a Imambarga, not an Islamic center, those rules are very different. When you dedicate a place as a masjid is a masjid forever. The usage of that masjid can never be changed. Even if the whole community leaves that neighborhood, even if the entire Muslim community abandons that city, nobody lives there anymore. That building becomes ruins. Still, that will be considered as a masjid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so a masjid is a masjid forever. That is the basic ruling that we have to keep in mind. Not only that, even when it comes to the fixtures and the items of the masjid, it has to be used for a masjid, or even if it's no more useful for that masjid, it should be given to another masjid, or if that is not possible, then you basically dispose it, sell it, and use that money again for the masjid itself. Because remember, the underlying philosophy is that masjid is the property of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Salawat. The second thing is that once it becomes the masjid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it becomes sacred. and it acquires this sacredness and holiness of itself. And then the ruling comes in, it is haram to make a masjid najis. To the extent that if you come inside a masjid and you see that there is a najasat there, or an area of the masjid has become najis, it is wajib on you first to purify that area before you do your namaz. The only situation where you will do the namaz first is if you are running out of time and your namaz will become qaza. But if there is enough time to do the taharat of that place and then do namaz, it is wajib first to purify that area of the masjid. And it's not only the issue of the custodian of the masjid or those who are managing the masjid, it is the duty an individual who comes in there and he finds that this area is najis, they have to purify it before they do their namaz. And therefore it is haram, for example, to allow a non-Muslim to come inside the mosque. And when we are talking about it, it's not only the issue of a non-Muslim. Even a Muslim who is in the state of janabat or haze, he or she is not allowed to come and stay inside the masjid. They are allowed to enter from one gate and exit from another, but only pass by through. But they are not allowed to sit there in the masjid. This is the hurmat of the masjid. And this is something we have to keep in mind. Of course, this is for all the masajid except Masjid al-Haram and Masjid al-Nabi. There, even going from one gate and exiting from another is not permissible for a person who is in the state of janabat or haze, because of the importance given to Masjid al-Nabi and Masjid al-Haram. This actually brings me to the issue of Imambarga. Why the Shias everywhere you go, whether it's Iraq or Iran or Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, or wherever they have migrated in other places of the world, why do the Shias have masjid and Imambarga? It actually goes back to this issue of the space known as masjid, which is sacred, and it has certain restrictions. Non-Muslims cannot come in. Even a Shia and a Muslim in the state of najasat cannot come in. So how do we call people to convey our message? That is where you will see that the masajid are normally built smaller, and the Imambarga attached to it is wider or bigger. Because when it comes to the Imambarga, Husainiya, Imambarga, there are no restrictions. You can call anyone. Muslim, non-Muslim, Pak, Najis, doesn't matter. The whole purpose of building the Imambarga was to facilitate coming of all kinds of people there so that they can get the message of Imam Hussein bin Ali alayhi salatu wassalam. Sometimes our people, even put restrictions in the Imambarga, make it like masjid. They have to think about it. Why do we have masjid besides, Imambarga besides masjid? The whole purpose was that you can use that facility without worrying about the restrictions which are there, which are attached with the masjid. And that is the reason why we have Imambargas. We can do so many things. And so keep that difference historically between the masjid and Imambarga. All the rules that I talk about masjid were for masjid only. When it comes to Imambarga, you can sell it, you can do whatever you want. Of course, it should be within the bounds of the Sharia. But there are no restrictions that we see which are there as far as masjid is concerned. Salawat.